People often ask me something strange. They say, if you already knew it would end, why did you stay for so long? I never know how to answer that. Because the truth is, for a long time, I truly believed we were happy. Not the kind of happiness you post online. Not the loud, exciting kind. But the quiet one. The everyday one. The kind that lives in small moments. Like eating dinner together after a long day. Like falling asleep on the same side of the bed. Like knowing someone will be there when you wake up. We didn't fall in love dramatically. No big promises. No movie-style confessions. We just stayed. And somehow staying turned into a marriage. At first, everything felt normal, peaceful, predictable, safe. And I thought, this must be what adult love looks like. People stop chasing butterflies. They start paying bills together. People stop talking all night. They talk about groceries and rent. I didn't feel lonely then. I felt settled. We built routines, weekends at home, simple meals, occasional family gatherings. Nothing exciting, nothing terrible, just life. And for a while, that was enough. Until one day, I noticed something small. He stopped looking at me when I spoke. Not suddenly, not obviously, just less. His phone became more interesting. The TV became more important. Silence became easier. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I complained too often. Maybe marriage just does this to people. So I tried to fix things. I cooked more. I smiled more. I asked fewer questions. I told myself, don't be dramatic. Don't create problems that don't exist. I became very good at pretending everything was fine. But something inside me started shrinking. I didn't feel wanted. I didn't feel chosen. I felt replaceable. Still, I stayed. Because leaving felt too big, too final, too scary. Because people around me said, all couples go through this. Marriage is about endurance. So I endured. I endured the distance, the silence, the way he was physically present but emotionally somewhere else. And then, there was the night everything changed. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a confession. It was an accident. I borrowed his phone to check the time. A message popped up. Just one line. But it was enough. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't explicit. It was familiar. Too familiar. The kind of familiarity that doesn't belong to strangers. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I felt calm, and that scared me more than anger ever could. I didn't confront him right away. I went to the bathroom. I sat on the floor. I stared at the wall. And suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the silence, the way he avoided my eyes. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't too sensitive. I was being replaced slowly, quietly, politely. When I finally asked him, he didn't deny it. That was the cruelest part. No lies, no excuses. Just a tired sigh. As if I had asked something obvious. As if the truth had been waiting for me to catch up. He said, I didn't mean for it to happen. And I realized something important. People never mean to destroy you. They just mean to make themselves feel alive again. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I asked him one question. Do you still want to be here? He hesitated. That pause was my answer. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Love doesn't always end with betrayal. Sometimes it ends with hesitation. That night, we slept in the same bed, back to back, a whole ocean between us. I stared at the ceiling until morning, thinking about everything we had been, everything we would never be again. And I knew, staying would slowly erase me. Leaving would hurt, but staying would destroy me. People think divorce is loud, messy, full of hatred. Mine wasn't. It was quiet. Two adults acknowledging that something had already died. We didn't fight over things. We didn't blame each other loudly. We were just done. When I signed the papers, my hands shook a little. Not because I was scared, but because I was grieving a version of my life that would never exist. The future I imagined. The old version of myself who believed love was enough. I didn't hate him, and that surprised everyone. They expected anger. They expected revenge. But all I felt was a deep, heavy sadness and relief. Because for the first time in a long time, I was honest with myself. Leaving wasn't cruel. Staying would have been. Peaceful divorce was the last kind thing I could do. For him and for myself. Not every ending needs war. Some endings are simply acknowledgments that love has changed, that people have changed, and that choosing peace is sometimes braver than choosing to stay. After the divorce, people expected me to collapse. They waited for tears, for anger, for bitterness. They thought I would be broken. But what surprised me was the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The empty kind. The kind that follows you from room to room. I moved back into my parents' house for a while. My old bedroom still smelled the same, but I wasn't the same person who had lived there before. Every morning I woke up, and for a few seconds I forgot. Then reality returned. I was no longer a wife. That word disappeared from my life overnight. No one prepares you for how strange that feels. Not lonely, not free, just unfamiliar. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. How quiet breakfast was when I ate alone. How no one asked where I was going or when I would be home. Freedom sounds beautiful until you realize it also means no one is waiting. At first, I filled my days with tasks, cleaning, organizing, helping around the house. So I told myself I was being productive. But really, I was avoiding myself. Because when I stopped moving, questions appeared. Questions I didn't want to answer. Was I too patient? Did I wait too long? Did I lose myself trying to keep someone else comfortable? At night, those questions became louder. I replayed the past like a movie I couldn't turn off. Every moment, every sign I ignored. I blamed myself for not leaving earlier, then blamed myself for leaving at all. Healing isn't linear. Some days, I felt strong. I told myself, I chose peace. I chose dignity. Other days, I missed him. Not the man he became, but the man he used to be. The version of him who laughed easily, who held my hand in public, who felt like home. Grief doesn't care about logic. It shows up uninvited. One afternoon, I saw a couple arguing in a supermarket over something small, and suddenly I felt jealous. Jealous of their noise, their conflict, their togetherness. That scared me, because I realized how deeply I had tied my worth to being chosen. Being a wife had given me structure, purpose, validation. Without it, I felt invisible. People started giving advice. You'll find someone better. Time will heal everything. At least you didn't have kids. They meant well, but those words felt hollow. I didn't want someone better. I wanted myself back. Slowly, I stopped rushing my healing. I stopped pretending I was okay when I wasn't. I let myself sit with discomfort, with regret, with sadness, with uncertainty. And something unexpected happened. The more honest I was with myself, the lighter I felt. I realized I had spent years prioritizing peace in my marriage over peace within myself. I avoided conflict. I swallowed words. I stayed quiet to keep things stable. But stability without honesty is just silence, and silence can rot a relationship from the inside. One evening, I wrote a letter. Not to him, to myself. I apologized for abandoning my instincts, for doubting my feelings, for staying silent when I needed to speak. That letter changed everything, because for the first time, I stopped seeing the divorce as a failure. It was a correction, a painful one, but necessary. I began rebuilding my routine, not as a wife, not as someone's partner, just as me. Morning walks, simple meals, small goals. Nothing dramatic. But for the first time in years, those choices were mine. I learned to enjoy my own company, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And slowly, I started to like it. There were still hard days, days when I questioned everything, days when loneliness felt heavy. But those days passed. They always did. I stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and started asking, "What can I learn from this?" The answer wasn't immediate, but it came. I learned that love should not require self-erasure. I learned that peace should not come at the cost of your voice. And I learned that staying quiet to keep someone is not kindness. It's fear. The divorce didn't ruin me. It revealed me. It showed me how strong I could be when I stopped clinging to what was already gone. I don't regret choosing peace, even now, especially now, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away without turning love into a battlefield. Not every ending needs hate. Some endings are simply honesty, and honesty, even when it hurts, is a form of respect. What no one warned me about was not the loneliness, it was the questions. They came slowly at first, from relatives, from acquaintances, from people who barely knew me, always polite, always curious. What happened? Why didn't you try harder? Are you sure divorce was necessary? They asked, as if my marriage was a project that failed because I didn't manage it well enough. I learned very quickly that society prefers stories with clear villains. If someone cheated, people know who to blame. But when a marriage ends quietly, without screaming or violence, they get uncomfortable. They want drama. So they want someone to point at. When I said, "We just grew apart," they looked disappointed, as if my pain wasn't dramatic enough to be real. Some people tried to comfort me. Others tried to correct me. They said things like, "You know, men make mistakes. At least he didn't leave you for her. You could have endured a little longer." Endured. That word again. As if marriage was meant to be survived, not lived. I smiled. I nodded. I learned how to end conversations politely. But inside, something hardened. I realized how deeply people believe a woman's value is tied to her ability to keep a family together, no matter the cost. If a marriage fails, they don't ask what you lost. They ask what you did wrong. There were days I doubted myself, not because I missed him, but because I was tired of explaining my choices. I was tired of defending my peace. Sometimes late at night, those voices echoed in my head. Maybe I was impatient. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I gave up too easily. Then I remembered the silence, the long dinners without conversation, the way he avoided my eyes, the hesitation when I asked if he still wanted to be there. Those memories grounded me. I didn't leave because of one woman. I left because I had already disappeared. Another strange thing happened. People assumed I was lonely. They invited me to gatherings out of pity, set me up on dates I never asked for. They treated my single status like a temporary illness that needed to be cured quickly. As if being alone was worse than being unseen, I started saying no, not aggressively, just calmly, no to blind dates, no to advice, no to conversations that made me feel small. That was new for me. Before, I said yes to keep the peace. Now, I said no to protect it. Some people drifted away, and that hurt. But it also clarified something important. Anyone who only valued me when I was attached to someone else was never really seeing me. Being divorced forced me to confront my identity, not as a wife, not as someone's partner, but as a woman standing alone in her own life. At first, that felt terrifying. I had been part of a we for so long that I felt unfamiliar. But slowly, I started noticing changes. I spoke more directly. I laughed louder. I stopped apologizing for my decisions. I wasn't becoming harder. I was becoming clearer. One afternoon, a friend asked me, "Do you ever regret it?" I thought carefully before answering. I don't regret leaving. I regret how long I convinced myself to stay quiet. That realization changed how I saw my past. I stopped seeing myself as someone who failed. I saw someone who tried until there was nothing left to save. There is a difference. The world often tells women that strength looks like endurance, staying, sacrificing, absorbing pain quietly. But I learned something different. Sometimes, strength looks like choosing yourself without making anyone else the enemy, choosing peace without hatred, choosing honesty without destruction. Divorce didn't make me bitter. It made me honest. It taught me how fragile relationships can be when one person stops showing up, and how resilient a person can be when they finally do. I stopped explaining my story to people who weren't listening. I stopped shrinking my truth to make others comfortable. My life became quieter, but it also became lighter. Not every ending needs to be justified. Not every choice needs approval. Some decisions are simply private acts of self-respect, and that is something no one else needs to understand. I didn't leave to prove anything. I left to save myself. And that, I finally believe, was enough. There came a point when people stopped asking questions. Not because they understood, but because my life no longer looked tragic. I had a routine. I had plans. I smiled without forcing it. From the outside, I looked fine. And that was when the real work began. Because healing is easiest when everyone can see your pain. It becomes harder when the pain turns quiet, when no one checks in anymore. When you're expected to be over it. I wasn't broken, but I wasn't finished healing either. There were moments when memories appeared without warning. A song, a familiar street, a random smell. Suddenly, I was back in that old life, not missing him, missing the version of myself who believed love would stay if she tried hard enough. I started reflecting on my role in the marriage, not to blame myself, but to understand. I realized how often I minimized my needs, how often I said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. How often I confused peace with avoidance. I had learned early in life that being easy to live with was a form of love. So I became adaptable, flexible, quiet. I thought love meant making yourself smaller so others could feel comfortable. The marriage didn't teach me that. It revealed it. Once I saw that pattern, I couldn't unsee it. I noticed it everywhere, in friendships, in family dynamics, in the way I handled conflict. Divorce didn't just end a relationship, it exposed a habit, the habit of abandoning myself. That realization hurt, because it meant the marriage wasn't the only place where I had been silent. but it also gave me power, because habits can change. I began practicing something new: honesty, not brutal honesty, not confrontational honesty, just simple truth. Saying, I don't agree. Saying, that doesn't work for me. Saying, I need time. At first, my voice trembled. I was afraid people would leave if I stopped accommodating them. Some did, and that hurt more than I expected. But others stayed, and those relationships felt different: lighter, cleaner, more equal. For the first time, I felt seen without having to perform. I also had to face my fear of being alone long term, not the fear of loneliness, the fear of never being chosen again. That fear was quiet but persistent. It whispered at night, what if this is it? What if no one wants you now? What if you missed your chance? Those thoughts weren't logical. They were cultural. They came from years of being told that a woman's timeline is fragile, that love has an expiration date. I challenged those thoughts slowly, not by dating immediately, not by proving anything, but by building a life that felt full on its own. I invested in friendships, in work, in solitude. I learned how to enjoy weekends without plans, how to sit with myself without distraction. That was harder than any argument I had ever avoided. There were days I felt proud, days I felt uncertain, days I wondered if peace was just another word for loneliness. But over time, I noticed something important. I wasn't anxious anymore. Not about texts, not about someone pulling away, not about being enough. My nervous system finally rested. That was when I understood how heavy my marriage had been. Not dramatic, not abusive, just quietly exhausting. I no longer lived on emotional alert. I no longer scanned the room for tension. My body knew I was safe. One evening, I ran into him by chance. We exchanged polite smiles, brief words, no anger, no bitterness. When I walked away, I felt neutral, and that neutrality felt like freedom. I didn't need closure. I didn't need apologies. I had already closed the door inside myself. Later that night, I realized something quietly powerful. I didn't leave the marriage to find happiness. I left to stop betraying myself. Happiness came later, softly, unexpectedly, in moments of calm, in honest conversations, in the absence of fear. Divorce didn't define me, but it reshaped me. It taught me that peace isn't passive, it's a choice, a daily one, to speak, to listen to yourself, to walk away before resentment turns love into damage. I no longer see my past as wasted time. It was a lesson, a long one, a painful one, but one that taught me how to live more truthfully. I didn't lose a marriage. I gained myself back. And that, quietly, changed everything. There is a quiet moment that arrives after everything ends. Not immediately. Not when the papers are signed. Not when people stop asking questions. It arrives much later. When life feels normal again. When you no longer wake up with a heavy chest. When silence no longer scares you. That was when I knew the divorce was truly over. Not legally, emotionally. I no longer measured my days by what I had lost. I measured them by what I could finally feel. Calm, clarity, presence. I stopped replaying old conversations, stopped imagining alternate endings. Not because they didn't matter, but because they no longer owned me. I realized something important. Peace doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from accepting that some things don't need to be explained anymore. I didn't need to fully understand him, or why things changed, or why love faded quietly. I only needed to understand myself, and I did. I understood that I stayed longer than I should have, because I believed love meant endurance. So I believed good women stay. They wait. They fix. They forgive endlessly. No one taught me that good women are also allowed to leave. That realization changed how I see everything. I stopped seeing divorce as a personal failure. I started seeing it as a boundary, a line I finally drew between what I could accept and what I could not. People still ask me sometimes, "Would you do anything differently?" I pause. Not because I regret leaving, but because the answer is complicated. I would have spoken sooner, trusted myself earlier, listened to discomfort instead of explaining it away. But I don't regret choosing peace, not for a second, even on the hardest days, because staying would have taught me to disappear quietly. Leaving taught me how to exist fully. I learned how to be alone without feeling abandoned, how to enjoy my own company without feeling incomplete, how to love without losing myself. I also learned that peaceful endings are not weak endings. They require restraint, self-control, emotional maturity. It's easier to fight, easier to blame, easier to burn everything down. Choosing peace means carrying your pain without turning it into a weapon. And that is not easy. I don't tell this story to justify divorce. I tell it because there are many women sitting silently inside relationships that are slowly erasing them. They don't feel abused. They don't feel hated. They just feel invisible. And invisibility is its own kind of pain. If you're listening to this and questioning yourself, wondering if you're asking for too much, wondering if peace is selfish, I want you to hear this clearly. Choosing yourself does not make you cruel. Walking away quietly does not make you cold. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to keep pretending. I don't hate him. I never did. And maybe that's why this ending had to be peaceful. Because anger would have been easier, cleaner, more socially acceptable. But peace was truer. It honored what we had, without forcing us to become enemies. And it honored who I became. A woman who no longer confuses silence with stability. A woman who understands that love should feel safe, not uncertain. A woman who knows that endings don't have to be loud to be final. This chapter of my life closed quietly. No drama, no revenge, no public breakdown, just honesty. And honesty, even when it hurts, creates space. Space to breathe. Space to grow. Space to begin again. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel less alone in your own quiet struggles, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep these stories alive. Stories that don't shout, but speak softly to the parts of us that are tired of pretending. Thank you for listening, for staying, for choosing honesty in your own way. Peace is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of truth. And sometimes that is the kindest ending of all.